deal done.
Then let's turn to Texas Republican Congressman Jeb Hensarling. He's the newly named chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, also co-chaired the Super Committee on Deficit Reduction. Nice to have you with us, sir. You know, we heard Will a moment ago saying, you know, how do you salvage a political victory? Because the reality is, if nothing is done, if you cannot get together, you go over the fiscal cliff and taxes go up for everybody, correct?
Well, the president's going to get his revenue one way or the other. House Republicans will do everything we can to minimize the damage to our economy. We know that by raising the rates on the top two brackets, as the president wants to do, Ernst & Young says will cost middle-income workers at least 2% off their paychecks, lose another 700,000 jobs. That's not something Republicans are going to be a part of. But the president obviously is going to get some revenue. There's nothing we can do to stop that. It's written into current law. But the bottom line is you can't solve this problem through revenue. And the president's not being serious. He's moving the goalposts. He started out saying he wanted a quote-unquote balanced approach. So the president's going to get some kind of revenues. I'm not voting for it, but he's going to get it anyway. Okay, the question is, where are his spending reductions? He hasn't put that on the table.
But you could avoid going off. If we know, no matter what, taxes are going to go up. At this point, if you go off the cliff for everybody. So what you could do, as I think it was Olympia Snow was recommending, you could do some kind of a deal that doesn't make taxes go up for the middle class, right? And then you would avoid the fiscal cliff, right?
Again, well, first, the fiscal cliff, relative to our nation's spending-driven debt crisis, is a pothole. You got 0.3% of all Americans have million-dollar incomes. This is a shell game. You can't tax your way out of this problem. I mean, you have revenues are about the same levels they were 5 or 6 years ago when deficits were running about $150 billion. Now we know that deficits are running $1 to $1.5 trillion. What's changed is on the spending side, and yet all this discussion is on the tax revenues. You can't get there. You can tax every millionaire 100%. And run the government for 2 or 3 months. This is a spending-driven crisis, and it has to be solved on the spending side until the president gets serious about it. I'm not sure what there is to talk about.
I'm not sure that the only conversations have just been on the tax side. I actually think that there have been conversations on both. But at this moment, right, again, we're going over or toward the fiscal cliff. If you do nothing, all of our taxes are going up. So why not, as a first move, say, listen, nobody at this point wants to raise taxes on the middle class and people who are lower income. So let's do some kind of a deal now, and that'll keep us from going over the fiscal cliff. And then you can let the tax cuts expire for the wealthy. January 1st, it happens, and you can do some kind of a negotiation. And that that keeps us from going over the fiscal cliff. But it's going to happen anyway, right?
This is the very kind of shell game that they run in Washington. If you'll just give me my tax increases today, I will surely give you your spending restraint tomorrow. You know, it's kind of like Wimpy on the old Popeye cartoon. We never see these spending reductions materialize. That's the problem. And right now, we're borrowing roughly 40 cents on the dollar, much of it from the Chinese, sending the bill to our children and grandchildren. That's just unwise and unsustainable, frankly. I think it's immoral, and what you're saying is that Republicans ought to agree and somehow vote for a big proposed tax increase in hopes that in decades to come that this president's going to do something about spending.
No, I didn't say that. What I said was, why don't Republicans and Democrats vote for a tax to keep the taxes lower for middle class and people at lower income, and let the other ones expire? And you could do that now, and we wouldn't go over the fiscal cliff. And I hear you on the spending thing. Yeah. Go ahead.
What the Speaker has done is exactly what the President claimed he wanted. The Speaker has put on the table a balanced approach. The President previously said, I want to raise the top two rates for $800 billion worth of revenue, and I want a balanced approach with roughly $3 of spending reduction for every $1 tax revenue. Now he's got $5 of tax increase for every $1 of supposed spending reduction, and he's doubled the size.
But you can't be surprised
he's doubled the size of the tax revenue.
But you can't be surprised. The President said no go to that with only a couple of hours, right? Because it did not increase taxes on the wealthiest Americans, which he's consistently
so
said.
with that, listen, the president won 51-49. He's got an electoral college victory. That's good enough to get him to be reelected, but it's not good enough to give him a mandate. And the American people, consciously, subconsciously, consciously, voted for divided government. And the mandate of House Republicans is equal to that of the President of the United States, and we're not going to go out and put 700,000 Americans on the unemployment lines. We're not going to take away wages from hardworking Americans, which is exactly what the President wants to do. The President ought to remain good to his previous commitment, and that was he wanted a balanced approach. Republicans are willing to negotiate in good faith, and I think it's pretty obvious, you know, particularly when the Speaker puts on a plan put forth by Erskine Bowles, a Democrat in the first place,
who, as you know, has backed away from that plan.
one who was appointed. Well, you know, get Mr. Bowles on. He was in front of the super committee. I saw him eye to eye when he put this proposal on the table.
But he put out a statement yesterday, as you know, and he said the circumstances have changed.
What I know is he was right in front of me as co-chairman of the super committee, and he had put it on the table. So if he wants to take it off the table, so be it. But the fact of the matter is, go and review the transcript, go and review the tape. This was an Erskine Bowles proposal. Now, he may want to put it up for adoption. I don't know. I suppose that's his business.
Okay, but let me just clarify for a moment. He's not claiming he never presented it to you. What he's claiming is that circumstances now have changed, is what he says in his statement that he has now released.
And the circumstances that have changed is that under President Obama, we now have our $4 trillion deficit, and it is spending driven. And until the president puts any kind of spending reductions on the table, all this talk of tax increases, you can give the president every job-harming tax increase he's asking for, and it's about 3, maybe 4% of his 10-year spending bill. Ultimately, middle-income Americans are going to get socked with a tax increase beyond recognition unless we do something on the spending side. There's just so long you can play this shell game of trying to hide the true cost of government for middle-income Americans. They're going to get socked with it. Again, it's 0.3% of Americans have million-dollar incomes. The problem with the president's plan is sooner or later you run out of millionaires. The math doesn't work.
Congressman
the
Jim
only way we
Hensarling.
can get there is with spending reductions to save our economy and to save the next generation from bankruptcy.
It's nice to have you talking with us this morning, sir. We certainly appreciate it.
Thank you.
I could have given